Shalom.
Shalom.
All right, we're picking up in the 43rd chapter of Bashiri, where we left off. This was 2 weeks ago. Um, we're in the story of Yusuf. Yusuf was the favored son, but the unfavored brother. He was sold into captivity, suffered through many hardships, through the inner intercession of Yehovah. He came to be right hand to Pharaoh in Mitzrayim. He became governor of the nation. Some years later, the land was in famine, but Yusuf had prepared the people of the land to be able to survive the famine, and all the known world came to him, including 10 of his brothers. He provided them with what they needed, and he sent them home, and he told them not to come back unless they brought the missing brother. Why? Well, at this point, he hadn't told them yet who he was. He had not yet revealed his identity to his brethren, and he wanted to make sure that they hadn't done some horrible thing to Benjamin, the only other son of his father by his mother, as they'd done to him. Chapter 43 picks up and says, "But the famine in the land was severe, and when they had eaten up the rations which they brought from Mitzrayim, their father said to them, 'Go again and procure some food for us.' But Yehudah said to him, 'The man warned us.'" He's talking about Yusuf, but he doesn't know it. "The man warned us, 'Do not let me see your face unless your brother is with you. If you will let your brother go with us, we will go down. If you will let our brother go with us, we will go down and procure food for you. But if you will not let him go, we will not go down. For the man said to us, 'Do not let me see your faces unless your brother is with you.' And Yisrael said, 'Why did you serve me so ill as to tell the man that you had another brother?' They replied, 'But the man kept asking about us and our family, saying, Is your father still living? Have you another brother?' And he answered him accordingly. We answered him accordingly. How were we to know that he would say, 'Bring your brother here'?" These are all good questions. Okay? At this point, Israel is so afraid of losing Binyamin, all that he has left of Rachel. He is so afraid of losing him that he's questioning why his sons told the truth. This is actually one of the few places in Scripture where he is called Yitzrael and does something questionable regarding his integrity. Typically, if he is not doing as he should do, he is called Yaakov, his given name that his father blessed him with. If he's doing as he should do, he's typically called Yitzrael. But there are a few instances, including this one, wherein he is called Yitzrael and yet does something that we would normally question and say, but why was he telling them that they should have lied? Or they should have covered up the truth? Okay? And I've wrestled with that over the years about why it would be permissible for him to tell them that they should have covered up the truth. And then some time back, as I was studying on this, it occurred to me The only time in Scripture that we're told that it is okay to violate one of the other commandments is if doing so, it would be the requirement for sparing a life. Why is it okay to pull the ox out of the ditch? Why is it okay to pull the ox out of the ditch on Shabbat? Because it saves a life. Okay. Why is it okay for medical or emergency services personnel? Why do the Rabbim tell us that it's okay to do that service on Shabbat? Because if you don't, people will die. Why nurses and doctors are able. Now, I'm not saying that a nurse or a doctor should schedule appointments on Shabbat, but if there's an emergency that puts life on the line, then we're allowed to violate Shabbat for that purpose because it spares a life. Okay, and it occurred to me as I was studying on this a few weeks ago, and I'd never thought about it that way. Because he's fearing that Binyamin is going to die as a result of this, or that if he doesn't send Binyamin, then they will all die from famine. That he is saying, it would have been better if you had not told him that you had another brother living. Because then his life would not be on the line, and our lives would not be on the line. And that's the only thing I've been able to come to, is that he was looking at it as this would have spared the life. Then Yehudah said to his father Yisrael, "Send the boy in my care, and let us be on our way, that we may live and not die, you and we and our children." I think Yehudah is trying to tell him something there, that maybe Yisrael hadn't occurred to him, because he's so worried about he's lost Yusuf, and he could lose Binyamin, and he's not thinking completely about, these other men, these younger men who are his sons, could watch their children die if he doesn't allow Binyamin to go. I myself will be surety for him. You may hold me responsible. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, I shall stand guilty before you forever. For we could have been there and back twice if we had not dawdled. Okay. Now, different scholars debate how long it would have taken these brothers to travel from the promised land down to Mitzrayim and back. Okay, but it would not have been a short journey. We know there's an estimate. It estimates anywhere from a month to 3 months that the children of Israel could have, this is much later on, but could have journeyed from Mitzrayim to the promised land had they not wandered in the desert for 40 years. Okay. They probably could have traveled faster, being a much smaller group. So let's lean to the more, liberal side of that argument on the journey, and say, let's say they made it in the month because they weren't weighted down by all the extra people and supplies and what have you. Let's say they made it in a month. He's saying they could have gone there and back 2 months twice. So that would be 4 months. Okay. So they've been sitting there, I would say at least 4 months, questioning, where's the next bunch of food coming from? We could go down there, we could buy it. Dad, we could be back by the time the moon phase cycles twice. And for 4 months, at least, from my calculations, Yisrael was saying, no, we'll find some other way to survive. And finally he says, just go. And Yehudah says, we can't go. unless you give me Benjamin. He's the key factor here. Then their father Yitzrael said to them, if it must be so, do this. Take some of the choice products of the land in your baggage and carry them down as a gift for the man. Some balm and some honey, gum, ladanum, pistachio nuts, and almonds. And take with you double the money, carrying back with you the money that was replaced in the mouths of your bags. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother too and go back at once to the man, and may El Shaddai dispose the man to mercy toward you. El Shaddai, the God who protects by drawing near to his breast. Think about that. Shad, literally, El, of course, is the prefix or suffix, depending upon how it's used, that indicates the divine. Shad is a picture of the mother's breast that she pulls the child close to protect it and to nurture it. Okay, El Shaddai literally is the God who is saying he is the God who draws us near to him to protect us. So it says, may the God who draws us near to him to protect us, may he have this man show mercy on you. It says that he may release to you your other brother, as well as Benjamin. As for me, if I am to be bereaved, I shall be bereaved. Okay, at this point, and this is a point I think we all need to come to some point in our lives, some point in our faith walks. He's reached the point where he says, I have done everything I can possibly do to make this right. There is nothing more I can do. I just have to trust him. In the Thanksgivings earlier, I was talking about the situation where I had done no wrong, but I was accused, and I could have, if anything had been found in the investigation, I could have lost my job. I could have lost my credentials. I could have lost the way that I feed my family, kind of like putting me kind of in the situation Israel was in. And eventually, I had done everything I could to show that I had done no wrong, but I was still being investigated. And because of his hand working, I came out the other end with both a promotion and a raise, neither of which was I looking for. Neither of which did I even comprehend could have been the result of this investigation, where basically they were looking for any reason, saying, has he done anything possibly wrong related to this? And at the end they said no, and by the way, he's been doing a lot of extra work he didn't get credit for. Here's your promotion, here's your raise. Okay. I had to give up the fight and just say, fine, investigate me. And I had to trust Elohim to have his hand on this situation. Because as long as I was fighting it, I couldn't have come to the result that I came to. Okay, he had to handle it. That, I believe, as I was rereading this earlier, I came to me, that I believe is where he came to when he said, as for me, if I am to be bereaved, I shall be bereaved. Okay, it's just going to be whatever he wills. So the men took that gift, and they took with them double the money, as well as Benjamin. They made their way down to Mitzrayim, where they presented themselves to Yosef. When Yosef saw Benjamin with them, he said to his house steward, take the men into the house, slaughter and prepare an animal, for the men will dine with me at noon. The man did as Yosef said, and he brought the men into Yosef's house. But the men were frightened at being brought into Yusef's house. Why? Well, think about this. What happened to Yusef, and they didn't know this, but what happened to Yusef when he went into his master's house and was falsely accused of doing something wrong? He ended up in prison, in a dungeon. Okay? Kind of in another situation like what I just described. He could fight it all he wanted to. Eventually, he just had to give it to Elohim. Yehovah had to have his hand on it. We don't know how long they were in Mitzrayim, but they probably knew enough to know that this wealthy man who was the right hand of Pharaoh had the ability to imprison them like he had their brother. Okay? And he probably knew that they probably knew that if they got locked in there was a good chance they were never coming out alive. Oh, and all that extra money had shown up in their bags. So they probably thought that he was going to say, oh, you stole all the money back that you left the last time. It must be, they thought, because the money we placed in our bags the first time that we have been brought, because of the money we placed in our bags the first time that we have been brought inside, as a pretext to attack us and seize us as slaves with our pack animals. So they went up to Yusef's house steward and spoke to him at the entrance of the house. If you please, my lord, they said, we came down once before to procure food, but when we arrived at the night encampment and opened our bags, there was each one's money in the mouth of his bag, our money in full. So we have brought it back with us, and we have brought down with us our money to procure food. We do not know who put the money in our bags. He replied, all is well with you. Do not be afraid. Your Elohim, the Elohim of your father, must have put treasure in your bags for you. I got your payment. Now, there's a couple things I want you to think about here. Number one, as much as Yisrael believed he had failed with every one of these sons, and we see that later on when he predicts, when he gives prophecy over each of the sons, and he says what they've done wrong and what's going to happen to their descendants, and all this in chapter 49-ish, 48, 49. Every one of them, he goes through and he says, oh, but he's a lion's whelp. And oh, he's, I'm being told it's 49. And he's, these two are instruments of bloodshed. And he goes through and he says, they've done these horrible things, but their descendants will be blessed like this. Okay? As much as he believed that he had failed with these sons, I want you to think about this. Whose example was it that led them to go and be honest with the house steward and to just simply tell him what happened? Because they could have pretended they didn't know anything about it. The younger men, the younger versions of themselves who put Yusef in the pit and then sold him into slavery probably would have taken the extra money for themselves. But somewhere along the line, Yisrael had taught his sons how to handle a situation like this. My guess is probably after he lost Yusef. After he lost his favored son, suddenly he had all this time he could put into teaching his other sons. Okay? We know from later in Scripture, we know that it was Elohim's will that Yusef be allowed to go into Mitzrayim and become the governor and save the people of the descendants of his father. Okay? But maybe part of it, I think, was that he was taken out of that situation. Why? I think part of it was so that Yisrael would have no other choice, but all that time and energy he was pouring into Yusef, that now he could pour it into his other sons and his grandsons. And as he was watching, before they had grown up, watching with jealousy how he poured all that energy into Yusef, if nothing else, They're older now, and they can stand back and watch how he pours it into Binyamin. But somehow, through the process, they've stood back and they've said, the Elohim of our father blesses him because he lives this way. And so they went to the house steward and they told him the truth, despite the fact that it could put them in the dungeon, it could have them beheaded, it could have them otherwise executed, okay? It could make them slaves. But they went to him and they simply said, this is what happened. We can't explain it. And the house steward, them not knowing that the house steward worked for their missing brother, the house steward says, it's okay. The Elohim of your father is looking out for you. And then that's where I get to thinking, how could they not know that something was up? How could they not at least know that the man who was right hand to Pharaoh, to whom the steward answered, at least knew their father? But they missed it. And we look in the Brit Hadesh and we say, how could the apostles not understand what Yeshua HaMashiach was saying? How could they miss it? How could these brothers miss who Yosef was? I think there's a lot of parallels to this story of Yosef and his brothers, a lot of parallels to believers today. And when we get to the revelation, when he explains to them who he is, he shows them that he is their brother. I think there's going to be you'll see a lot of parallels that I'll try to point out of the connection between the experience that they were having and the experience that some of us who have a history in the mainline churches, who didn't know our Jewish ancestry until later, okay, that some of us had this revelation. And that will correspond to that. But right now, I'm looking at this, and it also reminds me of when I go to these mainline groups, and I talk to them about the Jewishness of Mashiach. And and one of the challenges I make is I say for this conference or for this talk or for whatever, I want you to take off your Gentile mindset and think like a Jewish person for the next 60 minutes or for the next weekend or whatever the situation is. You've heard me say that, haven't you, brother? You've seen when we've done men's conferences and you've gone with me and you've heard me challenge these men and say, for the next 3 days, I want you to think like a Jewish man. Okay, I'm going to explain to you what a Jewish man would see looking at this and look at it from this perspective, and your understanding of Scripture is going to go deeper. And I think that's a lot of what was going on here, as what's going on in the mainline churches, is that they're not seeing past the Makkah, they're not seeing past the clothes of Mitzrayim and the makeup and the whatever that he had on to make him look like a Mitzrayim. And they couldn't see that this was their brother. And I think there are a lot of people in the mainline churches today, I know I was one of them, I could not see who Mashiach is because of how they had him dressed up. And he brought out Shimeon to them. Then the man brought the men into Yosef's house. He gave them water to bathe their feet, and he provided feed for their asses. Now, the feed for the donkeys, that would be kind of given, okay? Hey, you all aren't in trouble. I'm giving your brother back. I got your payment. I don't know where that other money came from. Oh, okay. I'm going to feed your animals, your beasts of burden. What really strikes me here is who has the custom? Who has the custom in the world of the bathing of the feet of the guests? Jewish people. Okay. Now there are some other like in in Eretz Yisrael today, there are like Palestinians and what have you who have adopted the custom. It has spread, but it is a Jewish tradition to give service to your guest to that degree. So here are these men, these literal sons of Yisrael, experiencing Abrahamic courtesy in the home of a man they think is a Mitzrayi, and his servant has just told them that the Elohim of their Abba has looked out for them, and they don't get it. But you know what? We're all guilty. He shows us stuff all the time, and we miss it. They laid out their gifts to await Yusuf's arrival at noon, for they had heard that they were to dine there. When Yusuf came home, they presented to him the gifts that they had brought with them into the house, bowing low before him to the ground. He greeted them and he said, "How is your aged father of whom you spoke? Is he still in good health?" They replied, "It is well with your servant, our father. He is still in good health." And they bowed and made obeisance. I want you to think about a parallel here. They have come into the presence, they've been waiting for the arrival of, they are now in the presence of the brother they don't recognize. And a meal is about to be put before them, but they have no idea what's about to happen at the meal. That's what the mainline believers, the ones who put their faith in him but don't really know who he is, that's what they're going to go through. Why? Because all they've seen is him, Messiah, Mashiach, with this made-up image. They're not going to fully recognize him, and he's going to have to take off. The image is going to have to be stripped down to the Jewish Mashiach, or they're not going to get it. Okay? And when they come into the wedding feast, the marriage feast of the Lamb, they're not going to know what to expect. Why? Because you have so many mainline preachers out there who haven't even really studied eschatology, much less taught on it. When I was with Ragma and I decided to do a specialized study on eschatology, people looked at me like I was standing on my head and asked me, "What is that?" Other students, other Bible students who were studying for a degree didn't know what eschatology was. If you don't know what eschatology is, how can you look forward to what it promises? There are a lot of people in this world today who are looking forward to his coming who don't have a clue what's going to happen when he comes. And that's exactly where these brothers were. Do we see a parallel? Looking about, he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and asked, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he went on, "May Elohim be gracious to you, my boy." Now you would think at this point, after all of this has happened, after all of these indicators pointing to this man knows their father, knows the Elohim of Abraham, knows the traditions of the Jewish people, and has taught them to his steward, you would think that by now the eyes would start to come open. But you know what? I think that about a lot of people's life experiences, and I think, why don't they see this? And I'm sure there are people who look at my life experiences and say, why doesn't he see this? Sometimes we can be so close to the situation that we don't see the forest for the trees. With that, Yusuf hurried out, for he was overcome with feeling toward his brother, and was on the verge of tears. He went into a room and wept there. Then he washed his face, reappeared, and, now in control of himself, gave the order, "Serve the meal." They served him by himself, and them by themselves. And the Mitzrayim who ate with him by themselves, for the Egyptians could not dine with the Hebrew, since that would be abhorrent to the Mitzrayim. As they were seated by his direction, from the oldest in the order of his seniority to the youngest in the order of his youth, the men looked at one another in astonishment. Okay, I want you to think about this. They were brought to sit at a table, and they were made to sit separate from him, but more importantly, separate from the Mitzrayim. The Mitzrayim believed it would be abhorrent to sit and eat basically with us. And that's still going on today. Okay, there are people who love me as a mental health provider until they figure out I'm Jewish, and then they don't want anything to do with me. I've told you all about some of those situations. There are people who think I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread until they find out I'm Jewish, and then they won't talk to me. We've all had that to some degree. We've all had that. Okay, you're a good old boy. You ought to come over to our church. Well, I'm Jewish. They never speak to you again. Okay, we've had not this home, but the previous home, we had vandalized because we were Jewish. Okay, and there's still that separation, and for us, we need that separation because we are supposed to be set apart for him, but we also need to be among the goyim. We need the goyim. I'm sorry. We need to be among them, or we can't be a witness to them. But yet we have to be distinct from them so much that they know that we're distinct from them. You know, there's an individual I've been trying really hard to witness to for this past going on a year. Be a year next month. And this person has told me repeatedly and will point out to me and is correct on the things that they're pointing out to me. You see that? That person says they believe in your God. They don't act any differently than I do. Actually, I have better morals and ethics than they do. Look, I don't do this and this and this that they do. Okay, that's a believer. What this person is seeing is believers who are eating with the Mitzrayim. Okay, and not being distinct. Now, the brothers were in the same room with the Mitzrayim. They were sitting at a different table. Okay, that's why Pesach is so important to us. It's so important to me that if you come in, you have to be a believer. Okay, you have to have met the requirements. Okay, all the other Moedim, all the other high feasts, anybody can come to. But Pesach is for the brethren to sit at the table. And no one who sits at that table is supposed to be a Mitzrayim or anybody else. Either you're in the covenant or you're not. Because you know who's sitting separate from us, but at the end of the table? In the future, it's going to be Mashiach. And if we brought people to the table who haven't met the requirements, guess what? That table's not going to be worthy of him. The other thing I want you to think about what I just read is how he showed them that he knew them. He showed them that he knew them because he placed them in the order of their birth from oldest to youngest. Boom, 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 boom. He knew everything about them. And they still didn't understand who he was. Gee whiz, one of Dad's old business partners or Grandpa Abraham, did one of or great Grandpa Abraham or Grandpa Yitzhak, or did one of them have some friend who knows our family history and is just playing a trick on us? Come on. Never occurs to them that they're looking into the eyes of their brother that they betrayed. Portions were served them from his table, but Benjamin's portion was several times that of anyone else. Come on, brothers. Come on. What's special about Benjamin? Okay? Who in the world would bless Benjamin greater than the rest of us? Let's figure this out, right? Did you ever read this story and just think how closed were their eyes? Well, their eyes were closed because it wasn't time yet. And they drank their fill with him. And someday we will drink our fill with him. When we sit at that table, that great eternal Pesach. I really hope seeing the parallels presented is encouraging you in your faith walk. I know it did me the first time some of this I was shown and some of it I figured out, and some of it I figured out, and then the person who showed me some of the others was like, yeah, you didn't know that? And I was like, well, I guess I should have caught on sooner. I guess my eyes were as closed as the eyes of the brothers. But there's a lot of this. I could preach this in a mainline church and a lot of people wouldn't get it. They wouldn't, because their eyes aren't open and they haven't seen the falsehoods being taken off. Do we have a midrash?